Okay, so let's get started. I guess after 2 days of talks about Moshe Vardi, the man, the myth, and his work, it is time to hear from the person of the hour. I thought it would be best to avoid his long biography in the interest of the time. So I decided to use his short biography. Moshe Vardi is a university professor and the George Distinguished Service Professor in the computational engineering at Rice University. He is the recipient of 3 IBM Outstanding Innovation Awards, the ACM SIGAC Gödel Prize, the ACM Kanellakis Award, the ACM Sigmod Code Award, the Blaise Pascal Medal, the IEEE Computer Society Goudet Award, the EATCS Distinguished Achievement Award, the Southern Universities Research Association's Distinguished Scientist Award, the ACM SIGLOG Research Church Award, the Knuth Prize, the ACM Allen Newell Award, and IEEE Norbert Wiener Award for Social and Professional Responsibility. Fittingly, when Rice released news of his most recent award, one of the top replies on Twitter was, "Wait, there was an award that Moshe has still not won." He is the author and co-author of over 700 papers, as well as 2 books, Reasoning About Knowledge and Finite Model Theory and its Application. He is a fellow of the American Association for Advancement of Science, the American Mathematical Society, the Asia Pacific Artificial Intelligence Association, the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, the Association for Computing Machinery, the European Association for Theoretical Computer Science, this is the short one, the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineering, and the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. And more importantly, he's also a jolly good fellow. He's a member of the US National Academy of Engineering and National Academy of Science, the American Academy of Arts and Science, the European Academy of Science, and Academia Europaea. He holds 7 honorary doctorates. He is currently a senior editor of the communications of the ACM after having served for an editor-in-chief. Today, he's going to talk about a very pressing topic. Thank you, Moshe. The floor is all yours.
Just a few words about this event. For years, I was reluctant to let people organize such event for me, and eventually I said yes. It's also a special occasion. It's Flock, it's in Israel. But also what I did not foresee when it was agreed is that currently for the past 3 years, I'm dealing with a very difficult family health situation. This has been the most difficult 3 years in my life. And in this period of darkness, this event is like a shining bright light. And I'm genuinely touched and moved by all of you. Thank you very much for coming, and especially for the organizer, for Giuseppe and Kuldeep and Christine for organizing the event. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So as I decided what kind of talk to give, I realized that in some sense, almost all of the technical aspect of my work has been already covered in the last 2 days. I said, okay, we need to talk about something a bit different. Now trying to figure out what I should talk about. And ethics has been quite on my mind for the past few years. So I want to talk how to be an ethical computer scientist. Now, a few years ago, there was some discussion on a Silicon Valley website bulletin board called Y Combinator News, and there was some discussion about ethics of what Facebook is doing. And here is a quote, memorable quote that I took from there. F ... ethics and morality. We Facebookers love to brag about our paycheck size. If this is how you feel, you're probably in the wrong talk, or maybe you're in the right talk. Maybe I'll change your mind. Now, even though it sounds like a manual, how to, it's not a manual. I will not give you a prescription how to be an ethical computer scientist. It's a conversation. I will try to, so what do I mean by ethical? and more importantly, how to pursue it, because being ethical is not a state, it's a pursuit, it's a quest. And 60 years ago, almost to the day, John F. Kennedy at Rice University said, we're going to the moon, not because it is easy, because it is hard. And I would paraphrase him and say, we're pursuing ethics, not because it is easy, because it is hard. And my hope is at the end, you'll not come out of it ethical, but I hope that you come out of it saying, I need to think more about this. If they've done that, it's a success. And this is not going to be a philosophy talk. Okay, as you guys heard by now, I'd like to narrow theory and practice to be a talk from a computer scientist. A few years ago, I visited Harvey Mudd, and Maria Klav is the president of Harvey Mudd, and she is an old colleague of mine, going back to the IBM research days. And I see this kind of sign on her wall. And I found it a bit strange, presidential office, and this big sign, don't be a jerk. And I asked her, why is that? And she says, well, I'm the most powerful person in this institution, and people don't always tell me exactly, if I do something wrong, people not necessarily even tell me I did something wrong. And it's very easy for me to do something wrong. So I need a constant reminder to myself, don't be a jerk. So if you come out of it, remembering this, that's not a bad outcome, okay? To be ethical person, number one, don't be a jerk. But I want to go a little deeper than that. And so we're going to go to the beginning. I grew up on a kibbutz, it's a commune, kind of Israeli sort of collective settlement. It's about 15 kilometers from here. It's a very idyllic place up in the Carmel Mountains. You see a picture here. It's a picture from today. I don't have pictures from then. At age 10, my parents bought me 10 volumes of a book. It was a magazine that was bound into 10 volumes, The Young Technologist. And it kind of changed my life because I read these 10 volumes several times from beginning to end. And it was clear to me that I want to become a scientist. Now I come from a family with rabbinical tradition, and my father was a rabbi, and I think he hoped that I would follow in his footsteps. But by the time I finished the 10 volume, it was too late. I was going to become a scientist. And you can see what I look like, 10 years old. Now, my wife used to say, you can take the boy out of the synagogue. You cannot take the synagogue out of the boy. And you can see this talk, you'll see the element of the synagogue in me to this very day. Now, in 1967, I had my Bar Mitzvah. It's a coming of age ceremony for Jewish boys. And one of the things you have to do, you have to read a portion from the Pentateuch. So this is the piece that I had to read. This is the ordinance of the law, which the Lord has commanded, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring a red heifer without a spot, wherein there is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. And ye shall give her unto Elazar the priest, that he may bring her forth without the camp, outside the camp it means, and one shall slay her before his face. And Elazar the priest shall take her blood, shall offer blood with his finger, and sprinkle her blood in directly before the tabernacle of the congregation 7 times. And one shall burn the heifer in his side, her skin, her flesh, and her blood, and with her dung shall he burn. This did not resonate with me. I did not find it spiritually inspiring. But there are other parts of the Pentateuch that I found very inspiring. Go to the book of Exodus. And you shall not mistreat a stranger, nor shall you oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourns among you. You shall not oppress any widow or orphan. If you oppress him, if he cries out to me, I will surely hear his cry. This did resonate with me. So you see, you read the Pentateuch, one book supposedly, and a huge gap between this very detailed ritual part and this one, which I find, morals and ethics. So what's going on here? So if you read the Bible, it's not a coherent document. It's far from being a coherent document. And there are inherent tension. There are kind of debates exactly what they come about. Was it written by different people or one person, different intentions? We don't have to go about that. But one of the tension was exposed very crisply by Adam Ginsberg to the Israelis, Echad Ha'am, in an essay from 1922, Kohen v'Navi, the priest and the prophets. And to see this tension between the priests and the prophets, all we have to do is, for example, to go to the prophet Amos 5:22-24. Thou you offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings. I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offering of your fat beasts. Take thou away from me the noise of thy song, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. So the story about the red heifer did not resonate with me, did not resonate with the prophet Amos either. Now, if you kind of think of the Bible, the chronologies, and you get the impression that Moses wrote the 5 books, and the prophets came hundreds of years later. And so you say, what's going on? Are the prophets rebelling against Moses? And the answer is that we don't have precise understanding of when these books were written. We know they were probably written somewhere between the 6th and the 10th century BCE, and pretty much the different parts were written pretty much about the same time. So there is inherent tension, deep tension in the very roots of Judaism between morals and rituals. And the story of the red heifer is about ritual. Protecting the stranger is about morals. Now, it turns out that the Jews didn't start it. You go 1,000 years earlier, and you go to Hammurabi, the Hammurabi Code, which is a Babylonian legal text. And here is from the prologue. Anu and Bel, these are gods, called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God, to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land and destroy the wicked and the evildoer, so the strong should not harm the weak, to further the well-being of mankind. I want you to remember this phrase, to further the well-being of mankind. So this is a Babylonian king, and again, we don't know exactly the history of the code, but he said, what is the goal? Righteousness. That is the goal of the Hammurabi Code. So for me, Ethics 101 is just follow Amos. Let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. And one first translation of me, stand up for the weak. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of incidents where I did stand up for the weak, and I was hesitant whether to tell them or not, because I don't want to say I'm bragging, look what I did. That's not the goal. The goal was to inspire you, and even more to inspire me to keep doing it. I'm going to tell you 2 stories. The first one, we heard about Thomas Feder here, and we heard about Ashok Chandra. This is not a very well-known story, but I will tell it nevertheless. So in 1989, I became a department chair at IBM Almaden. A couple of years later, Ashok Chandra moved from Watson to Almaden, and he became director of computer science. Just shortly before he came, we hired Thomas Feder as research staff member, RSM, research staff member. And then Ashok Chandra arrived. A year after you were hired as research staff member, you had to give a talk to all the department managers in computer science. This was considered your first year review, and you got some kind of feedback after that. So Feder gives a talk on consent satisfaction problem and the dichotomy conjecture. And then there was discussion between the manager, and then I sit down with Ashok, and he tells me, you have to tell Thomas that he failed the first year review. I was astounded, some discussion with him, and then I said, I'm paraphrasing, I'm afraid I cannot do that, Ashok. Now, history proved that I was right, because just 4 years ago, this paper received the Church Award. And of course, we could not know it at the time, but I thought it was a significant piece of work. And I said, Ashok, I cannot tell, I believe this is very good work, and I cannot go and tell the person he failed the review just because you, for some reason, think that it's not good work. Now, IBM was not academia. I mean, this was IBM. Ashok was my manager. He could say, if you cannot do that, you cannot do that. That's your job as a manager. Then I'm going to remove you as a manager. I'll find someone else. But he was actually a very smart person, and he realized that if you're going to remove me as a manager, there will be a sting, there will be some inquiry what's going on, and he knew that he was on shaky foundation. So he said, "You're his manager. I'll let you manage him." And he de-escalated the situation, and we moved on. So this is story number one. Several years later, I'm already at Rice. I came to Rice in 93. In 2008, we had a financial crisis. This is not exactly about protecting the weak, but this is a version of it, which is speaking truth to power. So across the street from us, there is the Texas Medical Center, which is the largest medical center in the world. And there is Baylor College of Medicine, that at the time was a top 10 medical school in the United States. But financial crisis, they were financially exposed, they took big loans, and suddenly they found themselves really insolvent. So they look around and say, oh, nice rich school just across the street. We need them to bail us out. So they approach Rice. And our president, David Lebron, said, this opportunity for me to quadruple the size of my domain, so to speak. He was going to take a major risk, but he thought it was worthwhile. And in November of that year, I was asked by him to join the faculty advisory committee. He's forming a faculty committee to advise him on a merger. I said, well, the president asked for your advice, surely you're going to say yes. So I sit on this committee, we have a few meetings, and I realize he doesn't care about our advice. He just wants to be able to say, I've consulted with the faculty. This is known as the theater of consulting. Somebody asks for your advice, but they don't really want your advice. And that I did not accept. I said the faculty has a right to have a voice, and there's a whole political maneuvering going on. And eventually, our faculty senate appointed a faculty merger review committee. So in response to that, Lebron abolished the faculty advisory committee, which was just a sham. He appointed a committee of administrators to do their own review of the merger. So throughout 2009, we had what I call the battle of the committees. By the summer, faculty merger review committee issued a very negative report. They said that the benefits of the merger have been hyped and the risks have been downplayed. Of course, Lebron's handpicked committee came up with a glowing report about all the wonderful things of the merger. And the dispute got very public, opposing op-eds in the Rice Thresher, even going all the way to the outside newspaper. And by October of that year, I decided to give a public lecture on my view of things. I called it, the whole may be less than the sum of the parts. I'm sorry, not sum, there's a typo, sum, S-U-M. And you can find the talk on YouTube. It became very, very visible conflict. And then by January of 2010, the merger negotiation was terminated by Rice. And many people came to thank me, and I said, no, it fell off its own dead weight, so to speak. All I did was shine a very bright light on a very bad deal. And all of this is described in detail on my webpage at Rice. You can access, you go to my webpage, you click on merger, you will find the story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So again, the story is, I view it as my duty to speak truth to power. And so I remember you, protect the weak, speak truth to power. Of course, it depends on your situation. You have to always judge what kind of risk are you taking. But at that point, I was willing to take the risk of having to leave Rice. Now, this really was very generic, how to be an ethical person. It says nothing about being a computer scientist. So let's dig in now and focus more on computer science. If you look at the past decade, ACM, the Society of Computer Machinery, our professional society, has three major events. In 2012, the Turing Centenary. Alan Turing was born in 1912. And you can go and find it you can go and search for it on the web, you'll see the program. It was a celebration of computing. 5 years later, Turing Award at 50, another celebration of computing. Look at us, we are so important, we are so powerful. were ascendant, was the phrase used. And then just less than 2 months ago, there was ACM at 75. This is ACM 75th birthday. Now the tone is much more somber. The panelists will imagine what might be next for technology and society in the years to come. Technology and society. If you look at the previous one, it was all about glorious technology. Now it's technology and society. One of the participants complained on social media, I found the whole thing a little depressing. What is all this hand wringing, which would just celebrate the computer science? But to understand the somber tone, you have to look at what happened outside of computer science. A day before ACM 75, on June 9, there was the first congressional public hearing about the January 6, 2021 insurrection. And the hearing continued on, and we have been learning that basically the President of the United States have been trying to subvert legitimate elections. He lost, and he tried to subvert it, to try to undermine democracy in the United States. But 2 weeks before that, there was a massacre in Uvalde, Texas. 2 teachers and 90 children were killed by a gunman carrying AR-15, which is really what we call in Israel M16, essentially. And I took it very, very personally, because when it's pronounced Uvalde, whenever I hear Uvalde, I hear Vardi, Vardi. So you look at, okay. You look at what's happening in the United States, and you find a country that is deeply, deeply polarized. For example, New York Times poll from July 13 find that about Trump, 92% of Democrats think that he threatened U.S. democracy, and 76% of Republicans think that he would just legitimately contesting the election. Or about guns. This is a National Public Radio survey from June 2022. Look at gun owners. 84% of gun owners, of Democratic gun owners, thinks that this kind of military style gun should be disallowed. But only 25% of Republican gun owners feel the same. So the polarization is so deep now, the people talk about the disunited States of America. And when you have such depolarization, it leads to political paralysis. Congress is essentially paralyzed, and democracy is in danger, because democracy ultimately assumes the willingness of everybody to play by the rules. And if you lose this trust that everybody is playing by the rule, then you say, should I cheat first? Because if I don't cheat first, the other part will cheat, the other side will cheat first. Democracy requires some level of unitedness. And indeed, in September of last year, Robert Kagan wrote in the Washington Post, the United States is heading into its greatest political and constitutional crisis since the Civil War, with a reasonable chance of the next 3 to 4 years of incident of mass violence. He was thinking about the 2022 election, the 2024 election, mass violence, breakdown of federal authority, division of the country to warring red and blue state. And indeed, a poll that again just came out in July, The Hill is a Washington, D.C. publication. Brad Ress wrote, a majority of Americans say the US government is corrupt, and almost a third say it may soon be necessary to take arms against it, according to a new poll from University of Chicago Institute of Politics. A third of the people believe they'll have to take arms against the government because the government is so corrupt. So I think it's a very important question to ask, what went wrong? What happened? Who broke the United States? Who made the United States the disunited state? And for this, I'm going to go about 40 years to a very pivotal event. September 81, I arrived as a postdoc at Stanford. Well, about a month before that, less than a month before that, something a little more significant happened. IBM introduced the IBM PC. So I just came just after introduction of IBM PC. Earlier in the year, in January 20 of 1981, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as US president. This was all especially the last two events were really pivotal historical points. The IBM PC was such a successful product that about a year, just a bit over a year, when the January 83 issue of Time Magazine came out, usually they have the person of the year, and Time Magazine chose to put the IBM PC as, now they call it the machine of the year, and they show us a person, a man, looking at an IBM PC. So they say the area of the computer has gone. It was not the first desktop computer, they were going back to the 70s, but it became such a huge commercial success that Time Magazine said the machine of the year. And it really started tsunami of technology. By the mid-80s, every knowledge worker had a computer on their desk. By the late 80s, all these knowledge workers, they said, I need a computer at home. So every knowledge worker at least had a computer at home. The World Wide Web introduced 1989. By the mid-90s, internet became commercial. Until then, you have to have access to, you had to be a research institution or academic institution to have access to the internet. Now it become a mass market. Google launched late 1998, Facebook 2004, iPhone 2007. So really an amazing explosion of technology that happened since in the last 40 years. Now at the same time, Reagan and Thatcher in the UK unleashed an incredibly significant I would say, economical, political revolution. Going back to the Great Depression, the reigning dogma in economics was Keynesianism. And the idea was you cannot trust the market to do its own because it leads to crisis. So the government has to act as a steering wheel for the economy. So the government has to be involved to keep the economy stable. And it's a long story that, I mean, what happened in the 70s, but there was stagflation, and Reagan said, no, we're going to go to free market, back to the free market. But this really became an ideology of what I call market fundamentalism, a blind belief in the power of the free market. So you liberalize, privatize, deregulate, no more fiscal stimuli, only monetary, controlling interest rate, tax reduction, government spending, globalization, free trade. Now, it did unleash a lot of economic growth in the United States. But what it did, it increased competitive pressure on industry because, for example, manufacturing now had to compete with China. There was something called the China show. And this had huge impact on US manufacturing. And so what you see here is what happened to US manufacturing all the way going back to 1950. And you see that the red line, which is volume in constant dollars, is roughly, of course, there are zigzags of economic, but it's roughly increasing. But employment peaked around 1980 and has gone down significantly since then. The last few years is total discombobulation because of the pandemic. So I'm suppressing it. But by the middle of the previous decade, we have seen how we went from almost 20 million manufacturing workers to about 12 million. So many millions of manufacturing jobs were lost. Now, but you see an impact on the whole economy as a whole. So what you see here are 4 economic indicators: productivity, GDP, job produced, and income. And if you look from 1953, let's say for the next 30 years, these 4 lines go together. And economists almost believe that this is an economic law that they will go together. If you improve productivity, GDP will grow, jobs will be generated, and everybody will become richer. Except we have the great decoupling starting again roughly in the early 80s. And you see that productivity continued to grow and GDP continued to grow, but we are creating fewer jobs and income is flattened. When you go deeper, you see we have growing inequality. So if you look again, going back all the way to the early 60s, the top 1% used to have take about 12% of the income. And the bottom 50% used to have about 20% of the income. This is kind of stable again, roughly until about 1980. And now you see an inversion. that by now the top 1% are making about 20% of the income, and the bottom 50% are about 13% of the income. So growing inequality. And people think that automation will cause somehow mass unemployment, and that has never happened. But here is what does happen. What happened is called labor polarization. We talk about polarization, labor polarization. So economists take the whole labor market and divide it into low skill and middle skill and high skill. And what you can see here, the picture 1983, 50% are low skill and 26% are high skill, and almost 60% are middle skill. But as you glide to 2012, you see that the low skill kind of didn't change much. High skill increased. There are many more jobs that require people to have high skill. They need to know how to use computers. They need to know how to use spreadsheets. It's the middle skill that have shrunk significantly. And the result of this, you have, again, economic polarization. So this look at income separately for men and women between 63 and 2017. Again, it's real, mean adjusted for inflation. And look at ages between 18 to 64, which are kind of working age. And you can see that the dark blue at the top are people with graduate degrees. This is us, okay, by and large. The light blue is bachelor degree, and you see that people with bachelor degree or graduate degree have done well, and everybody else has either barely kept ground or even lost ground. So if you want to know, you remember you may have seen Trump rallies, and you see people who are very angry, and you kind of say, what are they angry about? But they have something to be angry about. They have lost ground. Just recently, just about less than 2 weeks ago, David Brooks, who is a conservative columnist for the New York Times. New York Times is generally more liberal, but he is on the conservative side of the columnists of the New York Times. And he wrote a column, I was wrong about liberalism. And he wrote, the most educated Americans were amassing more and more wealth, dominating the best living areas, pouring advances onto their kids. A highly unequal caste system was forming. Just to give you an idea, that if you're a computer scientist, I mean, I'm not talking about undergraduate students, but anybody else who's a computer professional is probably in the top 20%, at least, I don't know in Israel, I'm not an expert here, but in the United States, if you are a computer professional, you're in the top 20%. About 50% of full professors in computer science are in the top 10%. So when we talk about the economic elite, it's nice to think that it's the top 1%, so we are not responsible. No, this is also us. Now, this happens on the economic side. But of course, when you talk about polarization, beginning, I was talking about cognitive polarization. Where does this come from? So it also starts to go back, first of all, to Reagan. So until the Reagan administration, TV was governed by something called the fairness doctrine, which is that if you hold a broadcast license, then you have to cover controversial issues and you have to air both sides of the issue. So it didn't matter whether you watch ABC or CBS or NBC, you got some different, some nuances, but they have to cover all issues and to cover both sides. 87, the FCC abolished the fairness doctrine because we don't need it now, because we have cable TV. So there are many points of view. So everybody can be exposed to all these points of view by watching on cable. Now, of course, the fallacy here, that people don't switch. I'm going to watch this channel, I'm going to watch NBC for breakfast, and then I watch Fox News for lunch, and I watch something else for dinner. Most people have one channel for news, that's what they watch. That's what they watch. So this has created filter bubbles. Now, you may have heard of Fox News, and if you just listen to Fox News, you're just basically get brainwashed into some kind of alternative universe. You should know among the right-wing channel in the United States, Fox News is on the left. There are much worse channels. For example, ONN, One American News. So they had a special issue on January 6, 2022, a year after the Capitol insurrection, and they explained to the audience that the people who broke into the Capitol were all leftists who put Confederate flag to blame the people on the right. So this is called false flag operation. So this was All of that was done by the people on the left to blame the people on the right. That's the story. People who watch this, they believe these stories. This is propaganda. Now let's go back to us. So the internet, the internet kind of exploded in the 90s. But the roots of this go back when I was a postdoc at Stanford. There was Usenet. It was a Unix to Unix worldwide discussion, a bulletin board. There was the well. And the culture was still the culture of the 70s. When people talk in the United States about the 60s really happened in the 70s. Started in the late 60s, but continued throughout the 70s. And there was very much anti-government, anti-establishment. It was the Vietnam War, people rebelled against it. And one of the things came out of it was the mantra, information wants to be free. Of course, information doesn't want anything, but this became the mantra, information should be free. It's a public resource. And so when Tim Berners-Lee came up with the World Wide Web, this is his modus operandi. Information should just be free. Now, of course, we discovered very quickly after, as we head into the 90s, TMI, too much information. Where do we find information? This became a big problem. And so the first attempt was, how do we find books in the library? We have a directory, we have a catalog. We'll have a catalog for the internet. So there was Yahoo tried to do that. It didn't scale. Then people started search engine. The very first few engines were pretty bad, but then Google came up with a fantastically good search engine. Now, Google is operating under the mantra, information wants to be free. So how do we make money? Or in the jargon of Silicon Valley, how do we monetize search? And they had a brilliant idea, advertising. They said, newspapers are very cheap, they're subsidized by advertising. TV, broadcast TV was essentially free, subsidized by advertising. We'll do the same thing. It was a brilliant idea. But they discovered very quickly that when you're watching TV, they have you as a captive audience. Yeah, you can go to the bathroom, but how often are you going to run to the bathroom? So you watch advertisement. Online, you just click away. So they say we have to target the advertising to the person. We have to know that you, Randy, will be interested in this. For that, we have to collect a lot of information about Randy. So it also meant that information that I see on the internet and that you see on the internet are different because they will show information. The goal of all of this information showing is to make you click on advertisements. So they're going to show you different information. So we already had the cognitive bubbles from cable TV. Now we have even worse filter bubbles. And in 2019, Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard published a big book, 700 pages, she coined the phrase surveillance capitalism. And the Silicon Valley term for it, if you're not paying for it, then you are the product. People say, I get free stuff. You don't get free stuff. Okay, somebody has to pay for it and answer it. You're the product. They sell you information to other consumers. In January 21, just after the Capitol insurrection, Shoshana Zuboff wrote a New York Times column, and she wrote, we can have democracy, or we can have surveillance society, but we cannot have both. And she basically said, knowledge is power. And now we end up living in a society where they know everything about us. We know nothing about them. What does Google do with all the data they collect? Trade secret. We don't know what they're doing. So they have all information. We have no information. And surveillance capitalists now hold the answer to each question, though we never elected them to govern. But privacy, there is ultimate hypocrisy by Silicon Valley. So here's a quote. Privacy is dead, get over it. This was said by Scott McNealy, who was the CEO then of Sun Microsystems in 1999. Here's another quote. If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google in 2009. Now, what is chilling to me about the Schmidt quote is paraphrasing. He's paraphrasing the previous quote. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Joseph Goebbels, 1933. Now, do they not care about privacy? They don't care about your privacy. What about their privacy? Who bought all the blocks around his house just to give himself more privacy? Palo Alto. Mark Zuckerberg. It's your privacy he doesn't care about, not his privacy. And Facebook learn from Google to focus on advertising, give you free product for advertising. And the goal is, they call it maximize user engagement. They want you to stay on as long as possible. And they have an army of psychologists. If you feel that, especially you talk to teams and students, and that they are addicted to these devices, it's addiction by design. It's not an accident. I mean, every time somebody likes you, you get a little piece of dopamine. You get addicted to it very easily. Okay, so lots of research show how this product was designed to be addictive. And earlier this year, Jonathan Haidt in Atlantic, trying to answer the question, what happened to American society? Who broke America? Wrote, the story of Babel, Migdal Babel, is the best metaphor I have found for what happened in America in the 2010s. And the fractured country we now inhabit. Something went terribly wrong, very suddenly. We are disoriented, unable to speak the same language, or not the same truth. We are cut off from one another and from the past. So let me go back to the question, how to be an ethical computer scientist. First, accept responsibility. We did it. We did it. Not maybe each one of us individually, but us as a community, we did it. And if you have read, there's a science fiction novel goes back to 1985. It's called Ender's Game. And spoiler alert, Ender thinks he's playing a video game. He and his friends are playing a video game. Doesn't realize he's playing an intergalactic war. And when he wins the game, it means they won the war and they destroyed the civilization. We thinking ourselves, if I use the Star Wars terminology, we think of ourselves as the rebels. We're not the rebels anymore. We are the empire. And so, but now there's a lot of talk about ethics. We talk people about responsible AI and so corporate social responsibility. But AI is not responsible. AI just code that we write. And the corporations, we know by now, the end of the corporations are out there to make money. Who has to be responsible? We have to be responsible. I mean, there's a Michael Jackson song, The Man in the Mirror. You make the world, you want to make the world better? Start with the man or the person in the mirror. That's how you start. And indeed, the ACM Code of Ethics start like this. Community professionals actually change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of the work, consistently supporting the public good. So I have a very simple answer. What does it take to be an ethical computer scientist? Support the public good, focus on the public good. Now, some people said, yeah, but I work for Google. What can I do? There's a simple answer. You don't have to work for Google. One of my students in a class on ethics, when we asked students about taking jobs, he said, I'm going to be in high demand. Why do you need to make the ethically questionable choices? He doesn't even have to say, it's enough to me, it's ethically questionable. Why should I take it? I'll have lots of offers. I should not take offers that are ethically suspicious. But we need to think about it. We need to start. Here is a story from Simon News. I went back, it goes back 2005. And I dropped the name of the computer scientists. They're all brand names in computer science. And they have found interesting mathematical research problem in these optimizing ad auctions. And they did interesting research enough that SIAM is the Society of Industrial and Applied Math. So it was interesting research. My question is, does this support the public good? I would say questionable, because one of these ad auction does is exactly creating this filter bubble. You can go and run a Google search on what is Exxon, and then what kind of advertisement are you going to see? If Google thinks that you are a liberal, you're going to see something about carbon sequestration. But if Google thinks you're pro-business, you're going to see about something against business, against regulation. So it's not always easy to decide what is the public good. But even you go to the Bible, thou shalt not kill. This is black and white, right? Well, no, not really, because we start making exceptions, okay? What is exception? What about self-defense? What about fighting in a just war? We can argue what is a just war, but what about fighting in a just war? So we make exception even to something that sounds black and white, like thou shalt not kill. So I'm not telling you that it's always easy to decide what is the public good, but some cases it's fairly easy. I mean, the news that come about, for example, about Uber lately. So already in 2019, Jacobin magazine wrote from the start, Uber business model has been based on habitual criminality and shocking indifference to human life. Okay, so Jacobin is a fairly left-wing publication. But just about a month ago, there was massive leakage. A whistleblower inside Uber leaked 124,000 confidential documents that's been exposed. And here is the summary in the Guardian. Uber bought laws, duped police, and secretly lobbied government, leak reveals. The Nation referred to it. The best economists Uber could buy because they have paid economists to publish articles about how well Uber drivers are doing. Turns out that the Uber drivers are not doing well at all, but Uber likes to have the image. This is ride sharing. You know, we are just the middleman here. This is really, drivers are in the driver's seat, so to speak. So BMW used to have a slogan, the ultimate driving machine. And now they're threatened by autonomous vehicles. So they changed the slogan. And the slogan now is, don't be driven by technology, drive it. I think this is a good slogan for all of us. Okay. And in 2019, together with colleagues in Vienna, we published a manifesto on digital humanism. And we said, we must shape technologies and code the human values and needs instead of allowing technology to shape humans. And there is a digital humanism initiative. I encourage all of you to go and look at the manifesto and look at the initiative. There is an active initiative going on. Now, many of us will say, well, I'm an educator. Many of us are educators. What's your responsibility? I would say if you educate students who are not socially responsible, then you're not supporting the public good. You have an obligation. I would say it's a social responsibility of CS educator to educate socially responsible students. So we have to look at our curriculum and say, okay, we're not just teaching, you know, algorithmic graph theory and database and all this stuff. This is important, but we need to educate students to be socially responsible. It must be part of the curriculum. And I'd like to encourage people to look at the paper I wrote with a junior colleague at Rice, Rodrigo Ferreira, on deep tech ethics. I have to say, teaching ethics is a very gratifying experience because you're touching the heart of students in a way that no technical class can do. Here is a quote from a student essay for the course on ethics at Rice. He wrote, I believe that there was no problem that could not be solved by all-powerful technology. It was only a matter of time before scientists devised the correct algorithm to solve all the problems of the world. Looking back, I realize now how naive I was. And to see students practically telling you, I was blind and now I can see, it's incredibly gratifying. And maybe we should consider doctors have to take Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. Maybe we need to do the same. I'm going to call it the Lovelacean oath, after Ada Lovelace, maybe the first programmer. First, do no harm. Don't start with features and add security at the end. Start with first, do no harm. And let's go back to Hammurabi, to further the well-being of mankind. He said almost 3,000 years ago. But you can find your expression of the same idea. It is your duty to participate in the great task of modern time, to solve on the basis of justice and righteousness the problem presented by the contrasts and evils of the present organization of society. This beautiful statement I found in an 1885 Pittsburgh platform of Reform Judaism. So to go back to the question, how to be an ethical person, I'll go back to the synagogue. So there is the Talmud, which is a body of post-biblical Jewish scholarship. And one of the books is called Saying of Our Fathers. And the whole book is really about how to be an ethical person. And I'll give you just two quotes from that. Hillel the elder. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? First, take care of yourself. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first. But being only for myself, what am I? What kind of a person only care about themselves? And if not now, when? I mean, when should I start caring about other people? He said, now is the time. And Rabbi Tarfon talks about the public good. The day is short and the work is plentiful. But it is not your duty to finish the work. Nobody can say, I cannot fix the world. No one person can fix the world. But neither you are at liberty to neglect it. And I think if you want to be an ethical person, ethical computer scientist, you could do no worse than follow this person of wisdom and Jewish scholars, sometimes in the 1st or 2nd century CE. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moshe. We have time for few quick questions and comments. After that, there is another session. So
Where's the mic? You have the mic, yeah. Okay.
I'll pass the mic. Please raise your hand.
I have a question for you. What is your view on the ethical dual use technologies like face recognition, for example? How we scientists should think about it?
So computer scientists are kind of late to realize that everything they do is dual use. Other disciplines had it before us. The chemists had it first, World War I, chemical weapons. What you do for chemical weapons is chemical engineering. Take any chemical engineer, give them the problem, they'll come up with the same solution, okay? The physicists had it with nuclear weapons. In fact, they started the whole thing of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists came in response to that. Union of Concerned Scientists, all kind of things came to respond to that. We have to accept that much of what we are doing is dual use. So you cannot stop it. And that's why I said you have to look at, okay, what are we going to do with this technology? You have technology you can do good or you can do bad. Okay? I mean, the same thing for many, like, is money good or bad? You can use money for good, you can use money for bad. That's why we need to have, I mean, I want to have that people would say, oh, this application, I'm not going to do it. And if your boss tells you to do it, you tell your boss, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to do it because this is a bad application of technology. So can you find positive uses of face recognition? I'm sure people will come with scenario where this would be, yeah, this will be a good thing. But of course, face recognition now that we have so many cameras abroad deployed. I mean, you know, you have the Ring product, and you basically and the privacy law are so weak around it that basically someone can go and create a tapestry of what's happening on my street. It doesn't even need no court order to do that. Okay, you can go just to Amazon and said, I need the video from I don't have it. I don't buy any. I don't have no smart. I have a dumb home. I want a dumb home. No cameras in the home. No listening devices in the house. You know, we have no privacy laws. I mean, this is part of the problem. We have no privacy laws in the United States. Europe is ahead of the United States. Okay, how to find the right boundary? Like GDPR, people complain about GDPR. Well, it's not perfect. But perfect is very often the enemy of the good. And so we have to, technology is part of our life. We have to figure out how to control it. We have to drive technology, not to be driven by it. Here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this nice talk. I have a question about when someone works on applications, I am clear on what you are presenting. I see very well what you say, and it's very nice. But someone who is more on the theoretical side of computer science, if you, I don't know, you create a new algorithm, a new technique to solve something very efficiently, how can you know if it is wonderful because it will save a lot of work to many people, or it is a disaster because it will create a huge amount of unemployment, and so it should not be like that.
It's the same question about dual use. So I've done some of research about making databases more efficient. And you could use this database to, we heard a talk today from one of my students many years ago, who is now a police officer in Rome, Andrea Ferrara, and how to use some formal verification technology to catch criminals. And of course, the same technology can be used. The same technology he described to catch mafia bosses, which I think we all say, yeah, catch the mafia bosses, but they can be used in China to catch dissidents. So the same thing can be the same, everything can be used for good or bad. And I don't think we can say, okay, if I do this, this will enable bad, so I will not do it. I don't think that works. I mean, we have to look at that's why, everybody likes to talk about like responsible research. And I'm very cynical of that. The problem is not with the researchers being irresponsible. The problem is the people who deploy product, they are irresponsible. And they like to talk about responsible research because it's what I call ethics washing. It absolves them. Oh, well, let's let researchers be more responsible. So, I mean, if you look at the Google algorithm, it's a great algorithm. It was a brilliant idea, what we call the page rank algorithm, okay? That was not the problem. The problem was they decided that they're going to give it search for free. And it's not really free because if you think about it, Google makes tons of money. Where does the money come from? So you say, oh, it's the advertisers. Where do advertisers get their money? They give it to the producers of products. Where do they get their money? Back to us. So all the money that Google and Facebook make, it comes ultimately from the people who buy products that are being advertised there. So it's a hidden tax on all of us. But they say, oh, you get it for free. You're not getting it for free. There's no free lunch. Somebody told you about free lunch. There's no free lunch. Okay, you're paying for it. So the responsibility for this to me is straight on the corporation that has shown as a business model that involve collecting tons of data about us and being completely in the dark what they do with this data. I have no idea what we do with this data. And especially in the United States, there are no privacy laws. And especially what happened with privacy is that there is something called the sand heap paradox. You put 1 grain of sand here. It's a grain of sand. Put another grain of sand. Another grain of sand. Now, this paradox goes back to the Greeks. They say, if you put enough grain of sand, it's a heap. When does it become a heap? So when you give information on the internet by clicking on this or clicking on that, every time you give is 1 grain of information. And you can see how much did I give? It's nothing. It's nothing. But they collect heaps they collect enough information to become a heap of information. And how do they influence you? They influence you 1 advertisement at a time, one link at a time. You don't feel you're being manipulated because it happens 1 thing at a time. But ultimately what happens, they collect heaps of information about you and they deliver heaps of influence. And we're influenced to the degree that it's very hard for us to see because it comes 1 grain at a time. And so I don't think the research here, it's not the technology is the problem, it's the decision how to deploy it, to what use, the business model. This is really the responsibility. So part of what our should be responsibility as citizens should be to demand from our political system protection, privacy rights. And now it's a big fight in the United States. Do we have any expectation of privacy? And now we have a Supreme Court that says, well, we should have privacy according to expectations in the 18th century. But life has changed a little bit since the 18th century.
As a responsible host, I will have to call for end of the meeting because there's another block event right after that. Thank you again, Mark.